can anybody give me a thumbs up just to see if you can see? There should be some slides on the screen. If you can't see them,
Thumbs up. Great.
it's good. Oh, very good thumbs up.
Cool.
Okay. All right. I think we get going.
Okay. And then I will, so first thing, it's the recording has started. Is that correct?
The recording has started.
So this is being recorded, which means that if you want to watch it again in the future or share it with anybody, that's fine. And then the second thing, if you haven't used Zoom before, there's a chat function. So if you take your mouse and you kind of go along the bottom, there'll be something that pops up. It looks like little word bubbles. If you click on that, you can type in questions. So we will do a Q&A at the end. But if you have any questions, go ahead and write them down there, and then we'll go through the questions as we get them. So that's a nice way to keep track of any questions that pop up. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay, Jill, let me just check to make sure. Yep, I can do the slides. So if you
Okay.
want to go ahead and start, and I'll move them as you need them.
Okay. Sounds good. Do you want to just go on to go on to the next slide? Thank you. There we go. Hi guys, thanks for coming. For anyone that doesn't know who we are, Andrew and I run Wild Strong together with a small team. We are married. I don't know if that's relevant for this, but it's just a thing. Um, at Wild Strong, we work to bring people outside and to connect more with our bodies and to spend more time with each other and just have a nice time. But mainly, what we're trying to do underlying that is build capabilities and capacities so you can keep doing all of the things that you love to do. And we do that in various ways. Andrew, if you just go to the next slide. So we have outdoor classes and online courses and in-person things, and all of this is kind of building into this building strength and skill and social connection, and hopefully just having a nice time outside with people in your local communities. And we know that as we age into the shape of our habits. So we talk about everything that we do today going into this idea of a kind of movement bank account so we can build up resiliency for later. All right, on we go. Just a quick, oh no, it's a very bad formatting. Just a quick overview on who we are in case you don't know who we are. Andrew is our head coach and was a personal trainer for a long time, and then lastly taught courses for personal trainers, then went in to do masters in public health and has been working in sort of health promotion. I was working in communications for a long time, and my big passion is helping to support people who kind of feel unsure on where to start and maybe don't feel like you have a place in fitness and exercise because it's not something that I've ever felt comfortable with either. Okay, on you go, Andrew. All right, so today this is a kind of two-parter. Today we want to go over what the science says with regards to building bone mineral density and quality using strength training. You may have come on our impact webinar. At the end, there'll be a QR code so you can watch the impact webinar. This is the kind of, they sit together because they target different parts of the bone. And so they work very well together. We've only got an hour. So what we really want to do, we'll go into that in a second. You can go back and rewatch this. You'll have access to the slides and the notes. And as we go through this, there are some sort of fairly complex bits that we want to talk about. We're not going to be able to get into all of the detail, but we'll link to other videos that we have available so you can get a better idea of what we're talking about. And then there'll be time for Q&As at the end. As Andrew said, as we go, if you feel if there are questions that are coming up, just put them in the chat and we'll answer them as we go, at the end rather. Okay, Andrew, do you want to go on to the next one? Okay, so today we're going to be looking at the big picture and what the science says in terms of building bone density, which bone sites and how it differs to impact training. And really what we want to do is to give you the tools so that if you're starting this from a basis that you've never done this before at all, and you're kind of hearing all this messaging online that you need to start strength training, we just want to give you the tools so that you can find a program that works for you. Obviously, we have a program, so you can come and join ours, but you might not want to. If there's something locally that you could get involved in, that would be brilliant. Really, what we want to do is kind of give you an idea of what strength training is and isn't, and how you can take this kind of framework and find a program that works for you where you're at. Maybe there's one down the road for me that would be really suitable. So that's kind of our goal for this. And then at the end, if you haven't watched the impact webinar, you can go back and watch that and you'd have a really good idea of kind of what you need to get started. Okay, Andrew, over to you.
Okay. As Jill said, we will mention impact training a little bit. So things like jumping and things like that. That's not the main point of this webinar. So go check out the video if you want a little bit more detail on that. But I always like to begin by saying, with any strength training program or any kind of exercise program, you really want to think about first, do no harm. So that's a bust of Hippocrates and the Hippocratic Oath. And what we really want to say here is take your time, start small and conservatively. It almost doesn't matter where you start, as long as you start somewhere and really think about progress occurring over months, not just days. And it's one of the things that I see all the time, especially on the internet. People say like, oh, do the 30-day squat challenge or something, where people just start off way too much. Just in the same way that if you were going to start running or walking, you wouldn't immediately go into a marathon. It's the same thing with resistance training. Starting off with something that feels like it's a good match for you, and then accounting for progress over time. So you're going to hear me talk a lot about this idea of progressive strength training. When we say progressive strength training, the clue is in the name, which is that we just want to make sure that you have a plan, you have a game plan. So over time, as you get used to this kind of exercise, this kind of training, you can add in challenge and resistance so that the benefits can increase over time. So don't worry about getting things perfect right away. Don't worry about having all the right equipment. Just start and then take time so your body can adapt. So we do want you to think about gradual progression. And then one of the things that is important is don't confuse progressive strength training with high intensity interval training or circuit training or necessarily boot camp training. And we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But there's a different emphasis here. With this, what we're going to talk about in this webinar is what kind of training is most appropriate for building strength and bone density over time. If you're here, you probably have already decided that building bone density and bone quality is important. Bone loss begins in midlife and accelerates after menopause. 1 in 3 women over the age of 50 will experience a wrist fracture, often commonly what's called a foosh, which is a fall onto an outstretched hand. So you trip or something, you put your hand out, and then you have some kind of break around here, possibly in your distal radius, your forearm bones, but could be somewhere else. And generally, a woman who sustains a wrist fracture has a 50 to 100% increased risk of later hip or vertebral fracture, depending what studies you look at. So sometimes these fractures are sometimes what's called sentinel injuries, which means that if you have a wrist injury, there's a good probability that you might have bone density issues in other parts of your body. So it's sort of a good wake-up call. Generally, stronger bones means fewer fractures, increased stability, and confidence to continue doing all the things that are important to you. It's not just about stronger bones. There's so many other benefits to exercise. Obviously, increased muscle mass is going to help with things like reaction and strength. And then obviously, you want to work on things like balance and movement confidence and all these things. But for today, we're really going to focus on the importance of strength training for bone density and also muscle mass. So the good news is it's not that complicated. Bones are living tissue and they adapt to stress throughout life. There are two effective ways. When I say effective, I mean things that are supported by the literature, by evidence-based practice. Well, I guess I can say peer-reviewed studies, and that is strength training and impact training. Both of these can be done at home or in the park. If you like the gym, you could go to the gym. But you can find a place and a setting where you can do effective training that is a good match for you. Like I said, there's lots of good research out here. So we do know now that we can very safely say that exercise and appropriate progressive strength training and impact training um, can have a positive effect on bone health, bone mineral density. And it is one of the most powerful tools that we have both to maintain bone mineral density and build it over time. Even if you're someone who has been diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, um, the bone density loss can be reversed for some people over time, or you can maintain it. And sometimes that doesn't feel like a big victory, but if you can maintain your bone mineral density, whatever you have now, you already ahead of the game. Whereas a lot of people will be losing their bone mineral density. It's something you can maintain through regular exercise, specifically progressive strength training. So we do have very good quality evidence here, and the evidence says that high intensity progressive resistance can prevent and reverse bone loss and improve bone mineral density. It's important to incorporate some impact movements. Generally, a lot of these programs will focus on the femoral head and the lower back. So when I say femoral head or femoral neck, I mean the top of your thigh bone as your thigh bone goes into your pelvis and your lower back. And one of the reasons why there's a lot of emphasis on this, both these sites are very important, but it's also generally where people get their bone mineral density measured through a DEXA scan. So it's one of the reasons there's so much emphasis on this is that's because that's where people are tested, but it is also really important for long-term health. Generally, people do best with about 2 to 3 sessions per week of strength training. And we'll talk about this idea of sets and reps, but basically, we want to get the volume of about 3 sets of 6 repetitions per movement, working at intensities, building up to intensities about 80% of your 1 rep max. It's okay if you don't know what that means. We'll talk about it. Um, while yoga and Pilates are good for balance and other benefits, they're probably not enough for bone mineral density. There really aren't any high quality studies that show that yoga and Pilates are enough for this, which isn't to say you should stop, continue doing these things, especially if you love them. Just think about other ways that you can maintain or you can incorporate more resistance training. And again, walking is great, also really, really good for balance, importance of being outside, going on walks with people, benefits for conditioning and blood pressure, but it's also probably not enough for bone mineral density in most cases. Um, and a lot of what we're talking about here is also going to be in generality. So what I mean is if you see a study that says something like working at intensities of 80% of your 1 rep max, don't worry, there's plenty of time to work up to that. Just like I said, you wouldn't start running a marathon tomorrow. You don't need to pick up the heaviest weights you can manage and struggle through them. Take your time and your body will adapt. And if you're new to this, it means that it doesn't really take much for you to get benefit. And then as you become more experienced, you can work in more challenges. So the main evidence really says that we want a combination of progressive resistance training and progressive impact training. So continue to work in jumping and stomping and gait work and things like that with various weightlifting or resistance movements. Some sites like the femoral neck, which is, again is the upper leg hip, or the distal radius, which is sort of the wrist forearm, and distal tibia, shin ankle. Um, these really seem to benefit from impact training. Um, Whereas other sites, for example, lumbar spine really seems to benefit from axial loading, as in squats and deadlifts. So we'll talk about that. And, one of the things to consider if you're looking at this, if you see anyone talking about this idea of ground reaction force, um, GRF, this is essentially how much force your body is experiencing if you're doing things like running and walking and things like that. So we know that in terms of beneficial impact, generally we want to get people somewhere up around that 2 to 3 to 4 times ground reaction forces times their body weight. So this is one of the reasons why just walking is generally not quite enough for most people. It comes in about 1.5. So we need to think of creative ways to increase that. Like I said, yoga, Pilates are good for a lot of things, but not enough in this case. Okay. So I want to talk about the why. And the reason I think it's important to say is a lot of what we do at Wild Strong is about playful movement and creative movement and getting people outside, getting people to move socially with others and doing problem solving and things like that. The remit of this specific webinar and program is really to talk about quantifiable traditional strength training and what the evidence says. So we have a really specific why today, and we want to ignore this idea of shiny apples, which I'll talk about in a second. So within that, when we talk about the strength training, don't fall into the trap of thinking that this is the only way to train or this is all you need to do. We really like talking about this idea of a movement pie, which is that progressive strength training is great. Get in your 2 to 3 short sessions per week. Um, but getting a little bit of impact, but then also think about doing the other things that are important to you. So if you want to go on walks or do gardening or do dancing or spend time with your friends, whatever it is that's meaningful for you, keep on doing that. That's great. Just find a way that you can work in some more deliberate training in as well, and you can get the benefits of both. So, like I said, we don't want to get distracted by shiny apples. One of the things about the internet is there's so many distractions on the internet. So there's a saying sometimes in training, which is the goal is to keep the goal the goal. So you always want to go back to your why. And in this case, when I think, what is our why today? Well, our why should be simple, realistic, effective strength training that's going to have benefits in bone mineral density and building strength and lean body mass. That's really what we're looking for. So you want to keep focused because when we go on the internet, there are all these shiny apples where people say, yeah, but what about forest bathing, or what about high intensity interval training, or what about this supplement or that supplement, or what about the gut microbiome, or how many carbs, or should I be doing cold water immersion? Should I be doing a sauna? Do I need to worry about my posture? All these different things you see on the internet, and a lot of these things could really be important, and maybe they become more relevant to you over time. But I think that if one isn't engaging in a simple progressive strength training program that focuses on building bone mineral density and getting stronger, I think it's okay to focus on that for a few months, build up confidence, and then you can start worrying about some of the other things. So if you really do want to go run a marathon or something, that's great. You can focus on that. But for right now, we'd really want to get people comfortable with what it means to do progressive strength training. So I think it's also good to talk about what is and isn't progressive strength training. So we're talking about yoga. Um, but sometimes there's some confusion if we go on Instagram or the internet and we see people, and I'm not saying this to be derogatory, but you'll see the sort of the classic little pink dumbbells, and you'll see people doing dumbbells and kind of shaking them around or moving them like this or moving them like that over and over and over again. Um, while there are benefits to all kinds of training, that kind of training is probably not going to give you the stimulus that you need. So generally progressive strength training can be really challenging to do in a class setting. It's not impossible, it's difficult. And the reason is that we want to be working at levels of challenge that are high. There's a lot of rest. So sometimes people don't like this in a class setting because when you're doing strength training, often you're resting 2 to 3 minutes in between your efforts. There are lots of small group training programs that can do this really well. We're not saying it's impossible, but the kind of strength training we're talking about, it's really good to sort of build up a personal relationship with it. So generally, HIIT, circuits, boot camp, large fitness classes, they can't really accommodate the variability and progress that you need, especially not if you're starting off and you don't really know what's appropriate for you. Again, it's not to say that they're a bad thing. Keep on doing them, but they're different tools for different jobs. So in that case, what is progressive strength training? And I guess if we're going to talk about that, we should really start by talking about what is exercise? What is training in general? And it's actually really simple. So our body is just a system made up of dynamic systems, and our body responds to the world around it. When we exercise, what we're doing is we're sending signals to our body to adapt. So all the time, our body has to make these decisions about how to use these valuable resources like calories and protein and minerals and what to do with them. So when you exercise, what you're doing is you're sending a signal to your body saying, hey, this is important. These structures that I'm challenging right now, my bones and my muscles, they're important. So I want to make sure that we keep on investing in the infrastructure of the body. So by exercising, what you're doing is you're providing the stimulus that tells your body, this is important, invest in this, invest in these muscles and bones. So really, when we're talking about exercise, we're talking about a conversation that you're having with your body. It's a way you can communicate with your body to say, let's prioritize this. And it's a lifelong relationship. So what I mean is, once you start exercising, it's not the sort of thing that you just do for a month, then you're one and done. It's about this continuous progressive relationship with your body and the world around you. So all exercise is, all progressive strength training is it's just a way that you can balance the stimulus of the work that you're doing, the exercise, with the recovery. So you give your body a chance to lay down new muscle or lay down new bone. So really, all progressive strength training is it's stimulus, and we can alter that in terms of the different movements that we choose, the different weights that we choose. That's sending the signal to your body to adapt. So you sort of provide your body with this eustress, with this good stress, and then you give it time to recover. And over time, your body will get better at whatever it is that you're doing. So all this could be called a strength program. A strength program is really just how we think about how we manage the stimulus and the recovery. So I guess the next question is what makes a program? Um, so if you've decided that you want to get into progressive strength training or resistance training, the first thing you really want to do is to find a program. And a program, it kind of makes sense of all these variables, especially in a long-term setting. And it says, look, this is what you sort of want to consider over time. if you want to make progress, especially safe progress over time. So a strength training program is progressive. You know, the hint is in the name. But with if something is progressive, it means you have a game plan for what happens next. So let's say you get to the point where you are doing sit to stands, which is just an unweighted squat from a chair to standing up. You get to the point where that becomes too easy. What we need to do is we want to find a way to add additional challenge so your body can keep on adapting. Because really, even if you start off not used to exercise, you're going to adapt quite quickly. And the goal is to always add a little bit more challenge, a little bit more resistance so your body can keep on adapting and can lay down more mineral density and more muscles. A strength training program should also include appropriate rest and recovery, both when you're working out, making sure you have those 2 to 3 minutes of rest in between your sets, but also over time. Again, a lot of time you see these 30-day squat challenges where you're supposed to do more and more squats every day. That's generally not going to be appropriate for most people. A lot of people end up in injuries with those because they just do too much too quickly without any rest. Remember, your body adapts during the rest. That rest period is when your body lays down new tissue, so it's really important. A strength training program should be appropriate for you. And what that means is not all movements are going to be a good match for everybody. So you want to make sure that you find movements that are appropriate for you in whatever way. You want to make sure there's some element of tracking progress. You want to see, are you getting stronger? Are you doing more work over time? How do you feel as you add more work and more intensity over time? It's really important to get a sense of how much work you're doing so you can see maybe what is the best next step. You want to make
Um,
sure you have appropriate intensity. So you want to make sure that it is hard or challenging enough to induce the changes that you want, but not so hard. You also want to make sure that you're doing enough work, but not too much work. And then finally, or maybe primarily, it should have a clear why. You should know why you're doing it. All the movements that you're doing, the challenges that you're giving to your body, you should have a clear reason for why they're there, because it'll make everything else much more sensible.
can I just jump in, Andrew?
Sure.
Just on that last slide,
Mhm.
just because I appreciate that people have different brains. If you're like Andrew and you like things to be orderly and and sort of well planned, then the idea of having a program is really great because you can really clearly see your progress as you go. However, if you fit into the camp of my brain, where I'm a bit of a chaos agent, I rail against the idea of having a program because I hate writing things down. But actually, over the years, I have found that it is actually quite joyful to see your progress over time and to kind of track that. I'm not as diligent as Andrew and other people, and in that I do have a form and I write it down, but it feels like it goes against everything that I naturally do. So if you're in that camp, it is possible. It is possible to find sort of joy in this kind of in this style of programming. Just in case you're looking at this and your eyes are kind of rolling in your head and thinking,
And
yeah.
the key is to make it as simple as possible. This is the one point whenever we run a new cohort of Strong for Life, there's always this part at the beginning where people are like, oh, the first time people see a tracking sheet or whatever, everyone finds different ways. Some people just keep a little notebook. Some people get out the rulers and the colored pencils. Some people like to do it on Excel spreadsheet. Everybody's different and it doesn't have to be complicated. Just find the simplest way. It's just sort of like making sure everything's moving in the right direction. It's just sort of like having a roadmap and following your route on the roadmap.
And we will go into sort of motivations towards the end, but a lot of people, if you're wired like Andrew can you just go and do a workout, and that's fine. Whereas for me, I have to find people that want to do it with me, and I'm mainly there for the social chats. And at the back of my head, I know that I'm getting stronger, and I know that, and I can feel it in my life, but it's not something that gets me out of bed and motivates me to go. If nobody turns up, say if all of my friends are away, I really struggle. So just to know that there are different ways of finding meaning for this as you get into all of this. Like some people are not motivated to work out on their own, and I think that's completely normal. And maybe you're not motivated to go to the gym. So it's more about once you kind of understand the groundwork, how can you find a way to make it meaningful for you if you're not the type of person that can go and work out on your own, because there are many of us. On you go, Andrew.
Okay. I mentioned this idea of having appropriate movement options. And this is the same thing. We'll talk about this again in a few minutes. But one of the things that's really important, especially if you're getting a plan off the internet or maybe a plan that someone else is doing, just because something is appropriate for somebody else doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be appropriate for you. So a good example is squatting. A lot of programs are going to include some form of squatting. And generally that's really good because squats and squat variants can be a great way to build up bone mineral density and strength in your lower back and your legs. They can help with your femoral neck, so again, as your thigh bones meet your pelvis, which is really important. They're overall a really good movement. But there's a whole bunch of reasons why one version or another might or might not work for somebody, whether it's, back pain or knee pain, or maybe one leg works slightly differently than the other. So you never want to fall into the trap of just saying, I must do this movement, or I must not do this movement, because there are a lot of movements that might not be a good match for some people, but are a good match for you. So when we're talking about this idea of appropriate movement options, you want to make sure that you have movements you feel confident in, and your confidence will build with time, but sort of right away, you just want to find something that's simple that you feel like you can do, and not, you shouldn't feel bad that you're doing something slightly different from somebody else. As long as you have this roadmap for progress, start wherever you feel confident. We want to make sure that we have some way to make the resistance or the weight appropriate. So maybe at the beginning, it's making things really easy. And then over time, it's finding creative solutions to how to increase that challenge, especially if you don't want to go to a gym where they have all these different kinds of weights. What are some options you have around your house, or maybe, in a community area that can be the appropriate level of resistance so you can keep on making progress? Thinking about whether or not the movements are a good match for your current balance capabilities. If you're feeling really wobbly, it's a great opportunity to go ahead and challenge your balance and build it up, but also just making sure that some movements might not be appropriate for everybody, and how can we work around that? Range of motion as well. So this is just anywhere from how your shoulders or elbows or knees or hips work, really any of your joints. Some people might do much more range of motion. Like, for example, I don't do very low squats compared to some people, but it's a good match for me. And then also thinking about over time, as you exercise, there's a good chance your range of motion can improve. So thinking about how you can alter that. Perception of pain. Are the movements painful? And then how can we work around that? Or is it something, with a lot of people, sometimes it's the fear of pain, that they might experience pain when they do something. So working around that fear and trying to expand people's capabilities there, making sure that people have appropriate equipment, or making sure that the movements reflect the equipment you have at home. If you have some tins of soup and a backpack, you can do a lot with that. You don't need to go out and buy expensive equipment, certainly not right away. What's appropriate for your space? Are you working in a one-room flat? Are you working outside? Are you working in a gym? Again, this idea of clarity or why, it's really important that when you're doing these different movements, you should have a sense of why they're important to you, and not just something that you're supposed to do because a piece of paper told you. Um, Generally, adherence is going to be much, much higher if people have an understanding of why they're doing things and they have a sense of agency over choosing them. And then, like I said before, this idea of next steps and progression. So always thinking about, once I'm comfortable with this level of challenge, how can I start thinking about how I can layer in more challenge so I can continue making progress? All right, so what are we going to talk about in the rest of this? Well, we're just going to talk about exactly what do you mean by lifting heavy, in terms of what is heavy enough in order to get that benefit we want in bone mineral density. How do we define that? How many repetitions do we need? So how many individual bouts or efforts do we need to do? How many sets do we need to do? So how many chunks of reps? So sets are groups of repetitions with rest in between. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. Sometimes the vocabulary can feel a little overwhelming, but once you get it, it's really not that complicated. And then it means that you can evaluate other programs, and it's sort of like learning a few phrases in a language. It'll really make everything go much easier. How much do I need to rest? How hard should this feel? How do I make progress? How often do I need to do this? What movement should I do? And how long will this take per session? So I'll get a few of these definitions out of the way. A repetition or a rep, it's one completion of a movement. So for example, if you're doing press ups, it's one press up all the way down and all the way back up again would count as one. If you're doing squats, one squat is a rep. A set is a group of repetitions. So for example, if your program says I want you to do 6 squats, you do 6 squats in a row, take a little rest, and that is a set. Rest is really important. It's just taking a break, especially during the session. It's really important for building strength. So earlier we said that circuit training and a lot of boot camp classes probably wouldn't really count as progressive overload because the rep range that we're talking about, the level of challenge we want, is something where you could do 6, 7, 8, 9 repetitions of something, and then you're going to feel like you need to take a rest before you can do it again. The rest is really important so you can keep working at that same weight. If you don't take the rest, your weight will get lighter and lighter and lighter, and then we'll stop getting the stimulus that we need. So,
I'm just going
um,
to jump in on that because the
yeah,
rest, again, if you're just starting out and you've managed to find some people that you can do this with, who you want to start strength training with, the rest is really nice because it's not like a hit workout. So you can actually you do some movements and then you chat for a bit, and then you do some more movements, and it's actually makes for a very nice social session. I find anyway, or you could listen to a podcast. But the I find the rest very nice. We kind of do our movements, then we have like a 2 to 3 minute rest where we chat about what's happening, and then we get
yeah.
back into.
It is really nice if you're doing it with somebody else, the rest. And then the other thing, is about feeling. If people are used to doing circuit training or boot camp, those are sort of designed to feel hard and get you out of breath and be really, really huffy puffy. This style of strength training isn't really supposed to feel like that. While you're doing the sets, it's quite challenging, but you're often only working for maybe 30 seconds or a minute, and then you get the rest, and it's challenging but it's not meant to get you really, really, really out of breath. You might get out of breath, and that's fine, but that's not the main goal of this. So everything I was talking about, I had it up above the repetition sets rest, for example. You might see it written in a program that generally they'd be written by something like 3 by 6. That would mean 3 sets of 6 repetitions. I've got a little plus there because we do something called auto regulation, which is a little check-in set. And all that means is the program that we recommend. It's nice to check in with your body and see what it's capable of doing so you know whether or not the weight is too heavy or too light. And it's not complicated. We can talk about that a little bit later. And then the session is just all the sets and all the reps and all the work you've done in a specific window of time. So let's say one session is about 30 minutes and maybe you have some squats, some pushing, some pulling, and a little bit of impact work. That would be the entire session. And realistically, for this style of strength training, you can get all the work you need done in about 30 to 45 minutes. Um, and that will be more than enough time to get it in. You don't need to do these big, long, hour-long, 2 hour-long sessions. All right, so one of the things that is really worth talking about, and we have a nice video that will be linked at the end. For most of what we're talking about, we've got more detailed videos that you can check out and resources at the end, is heavy. So one thing about a lot of this research, all the research that we kind of flashed up at the beginning, is that over time, if you want to continue to make progress with progressive strength training, it does mean that the weight has to be relatively heavy. So in strength training, we talk about intensity of resistance in terms of what's called a 1 rep max. And that is what is the heaviest weight you could lift one time, but not 2 times with good form. So let's say there's a really heavy rock and I really get myself ready and I kind of get and I pick it up and it was really hard. And then someone's asked me, well, if you put it back down, could you pick it up again? I said, no, probably not. I'd need a rest. That would be close to my 1 rep max. If you can lift something 2 times, but not 3 times, it's your 2 rep max, and so on and so forth. Um, and this sounds complicated, but actually it makes a lot of sense. The more repetitions you can do of a movement, okay, the lower percentage it is of your 1 rep max. It sounds confusing, but just think about it for a second. If somebody handed you something really light, let's say someone handed you a very small tin of tomato paste, and they say, how many times could you lift this overhead? You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could keep on doing that, maybe 30 or 40 times. If you can do it 30 or 40 times, if it's your 30 rep max, that's probably going to be way, way too low in terms of challenge to build up the kind of strength and bone density we want. Okay. So, really, what we're looking for is finding something that's roughly around 80% of your 1 rep max, which kind of works into something that you can lift around 5 to 8 times before you need to get a rest. If that sounds really complicated, um, don't really worry about it. You just want to find something that you can lift 6, 7, 8 times before you need a rest. And then if you just maintain that and get stronger over time, you'll be fine.
We're
Also, if
going to
that's
do we're going to do a worked example all together in a minute.
yeah,
So if this is completely baffling, hold
yeah.
tight.
Um, So basically, yeah, there's just this relationship between the number of times that you can do a certain weight and what kind of rep max we're talking about. So if you look over here, if you can only do it one time, it's 100% of your one rep max. And usually what we do is we kind of stay around that maybe 75 to 85%. So that somewhere between that 6 to 10 range is really what we're looking for. So if you find that you have a set of those pink dumbbells and you start trying to press them overhead, and if you realize you can do them 12, 13, 14, 15 times, it probably means that you are strong enough to go on to a heavier challenge if you want to continue to get the benefits that we're talking about. Um, the other question we get quite a lot is what kind of rep ranges should be working for different benefits. Um, and the biggest thing here is all this stuff is on a continuum. So what I mean is like if let's say you're doing reps of between 5, 6, 7, 8, that's generally considered a sort of strength rep range, but you're still going to get the other benefits of muscle endurance, hypertrophy, which is muscle growth. There's no magical line in the sand where if you go from 8 reps to 9 reps, suddenly you're not building strength anymore. So most people will get benefit from different things. It's really just about what's appropriate. And again, we really want to be working somewhere, I'm going to say between 6 and 10 reps, give or take, and once you start getting that 12, 13 rep range, it just means while there are lots of benefits, we're probably not going to be building the strength and the bone density that we want in that case. How long do you rest? Well, generally, if you're doing strength training, you want to rest about 2 minutes, maybe all the way up to 5 minutes, but that's probably, we don't need to worry about that. And that might sound like a lot because if you're used to doing circuit training and boot camp, there's almost no rest. But remember, with that kind of training, that's designed to help you with conditioning. It's designed to get you out of breath. It's sort of designed to make you feel like you're working hard. And there are loads of benefits to that kind of training. But again, for the strength training, if you're working at the appropriate intensity, you are going to want that at least 2 to 3 minutes of rest because that helps you keep the intensity high so you can keep on getting benefits. For our programs, usually 2 minutes is enough. Competitive powerlifters will take 5 minutes in between their sets, but for us, usually about 2 minutes is probably fine. Um, One of the questions people get is, well, what if I get bored if I'm doing the same things over and over and over again? Well, eventually the weight will feel heavy enough. Sorry, with the rest, what do I do during the rest? So eventually the weight will feel heavy as you progress. You're going to look forward to the rest. At first, you might feel like you have too much free time, so that's a good opportunity to do a nice stretch or two. I generally stay off my phone because I find that 2 minutes can turn into 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes on the phone. So I like to do a little stretch, or I keep a little notebook on me, things like that. And I make the most of my 2 or 3 minutes. I have a chat if I'm with somebody, and then I go back to it. But again, avoid that temptation to cut down on rest. We don't want this to be conditioning or a HIIT class. Remember, our goal here is to focus on strength and bone density. And like Jill said, try to enjoy that rest period. How difficult should this feel? That's another good question. And there's lots of ways to measure difficulty, but something that became popular in the last 10, 15 years is something called RPE, rate of perceived exertion, which sounds complicated, but actually you just imagine a 10-point scale. So imagine a 10-point scale, one being something that's really, really easy, almost no effort at all, 10 being something that's so difficult you couldn't possibly do any more. Usually most people say keep it around an 8 out of 10. So, if you're doing a set of lifts, you want to think, could you do it? Could you have done that one more time? Yeah, probably. Could you have done it 2 more times? Maybe. What about 3 more times? No, it's probably a bit too heavy. So what that means is you don't always have to work to failure. You don't always need to be shaking and sweating at the end. You just want it to be challenging enough so it feels like an 8 out of 10. How do I progress? Um, this is something that really depends on different people because people will progress at different rates. But essentially, if you get to this point where if your program says 3 sets of 6 reps, okay, so you do a set of 6, let's say on a squat, and it feels good. You do your rest. You do another set of 6 on your squat, and it feels good. Then you do your final set of 6 on the squat. If you're able to get those reps, then you can go ahead and progress. And there's lots of other ways to look at that, but it just means once a weight becomes light enough to you that you can do it all the times you need to do it, then you can go ahead and just add a little bit of weight. It doesn't have to be a lot of weight. You could just go, if you're using a sandbag, you could just pour 500 grams into a sandbag. If you're using, I don't know, like a bucket filled with rocks, put an extra rock in your bucket. It doesn't have to be a big jump. In fact, if you just focus on slow, continuous progress, that might work a lot better for people than doing these big jumps. So again, our goal is to stay in the strength range, so somewhere around 6, 7, 8, 9 repetitions, but not getting into that 12, 13, 14 range. And that's really the extent of it. If I was going to give an overview, I'd say, well, first figure out what your why is. So your why is to improve strength and bone density. How do we do it? Working at about 80 to 85% of your one rep max. So that's working around 6 reps, 7, 8, 9 reps, but not doing much more than that per set. How often? About 2 to 3 sessions per week. Twice a week is going to be more than enough for most people. How much? Usually about 3 sets of about 6 repetitions of moderate intensity per movement. How long should you rest? About 2 to 3 minutes of rest before repeating the same movement. Which movements we can talk about that, but you want to have a good mix of upper body, lower body, pushing and pulling. And then in terms of range of motion, try to be consistent in your range of motion. So what I mean is try to make it so your reps look about the same. You don't want to fall into that trap of, let's say you're squatting. Hey, let me get my video up for this one. Let's say you're squatting and at first you're going really low and then you're coming back up and you're going really low and then coming back up. And then maybe in your next set, you're not going quite as low and then you're not going quite as low and you're not going quite as low. We want to make sure we have consistent form on this. So you want to find some way to make sure your range of motion and form is consistent. And there's lots of ways to do that. You can set up the way you set up your movements. You can just find certain points of performance, or you can talk to a friend or someone and have them evaluate you. How are we doing on time, Jill?
We're okay. We've got about 20, just under 20 minutes, but I think
Okay,
we could
cool.
go into the work. We could just go over this bit and then do a worked example so that
Yeah, that sounds
you've
good.
got an idea what we're
So,
talking about.
next question that people always ask is which movements do I choose? So basically, we want movements that stimulate our hips, our legs, and our lower back. That's going to be really important for the bone density. Um, and those are going to be our top priorities, but then we want to make sure we get other movements in terms of quality of life and capabilities. We want weight-bearing movements that actually load the spine. So what that means is something that sort of compresses the spine just enough to stimulate it, um, so that your body knows that it's being weighted. We want a good balance of upper, lower body pushing and pulling. So basically, you want some kind of squat or lunge or both, some kind of hinge or pickup, some kind of push or press, some kind of pull. And then I would add into that um, some kind of impact. And then also considering things like loaded carries and things like that, which just have lots of benefits for grip and balance and strength. So, what are your lower body strength options? There's lots of options. We see a lot of the same movements show up again and again and again. One of the most influential studies on bone density, the Liftmore study, it used a variation of deadlifts and bilateral squats. But like when I was saying, you want to find a good match here. So you probably want to have something that looks like a pickup, something that looks like a squat, something that just really works on your hinging pattern. So sort of keeping your back straight and pushing your hips back. And that's really good for your posterior chain. And then I think it's probably good to work in some unilateral knee movements. So some variation of maybe a lunge or some sort of get up or something where it's nice to focus on one leg at a time as well as two. Um, what this means for you, it's just worth remembering that everything changes depending on your body type, your injury history, how and where you carry out these movements. So this is why we're talking about finding movements that are appropriate for you. What matters is gradually adding weight or challenge that your body can handle over time. And where you start is going to depend on your history, where you are right now, your body. So the most important thing is just to start of something that's appropriate, not too challenging, not too intimidating, not too complicated, doesn't require a bunch of equipment. Just start and then build up slowly over time. So even if you feel like what you're doing today um, isn't what you should be doing, don't worry about it. Just through consistency and add and challenge over time, you'll get there. So the most important thing is really just to build up the confidence and the habits, and then you can go ahead and find other weights as you go.
Just to say on that, Andrew, for a lot of us, the barrier to this is confidence. So actually spending a few months finding your feet and finding the movement that you're confident with and that you feel like your body is capable of right now is much more important than trying to work up to loading quickly.
Yeah.
Quickly. Oh,
I think that really is important. It's just finding some place to start. Okay, so we're just going to do a little example right here. If you've got your camera off, or if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. There's no pressure. If it's something that you're curious about, we can give it a go. So, one of the things that we really try to do in our program is we try to find a version of the program that is accessible, or a version of each movement that's accessible for different people. And that's both in terms of how difficult the movement is and the required equipment. Because I think, as Jill said, the most important thing is just to find something that works for you. So, one of the movements we have is called a sit to stand, which is a squat variant. Hang on. And a sit to stand is a really nice place to start because most people have a chair of some kind in their house. And it's also one of those movements that shows up a lot in different kinds of tests and studies. So it's one of the things that your GP might give you if they want to test lower body strength and things like that. So I'm just going to move this around a little bit. Let's see if I can get this in.
I've got a
So here,
demo. I can do a demo here, Andrew.
we
You
do a
can
demo?
talk.
Okay.
Yeah, you can talk.
Okay.
I'll demo.
All right. So
See if it
Jill,
works. See if people can see my chair. Oh
well,
no.
your background's on. You'll have to turn your
I
background.
know. Okay, just let's talk amongst ourselves for a second while I just sort this out. Uh, okay, hang on. Okay, where is it? Right, got it. Can everyone see my
Okay.
back? There we go.
Good.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah. Okay,
So for this, I'll talk you through. Jill's going to want a chair. Do you have a chair?
I have a chair.
Good. Can we see the chair? There it is.
How do you
Good.
see the chair?
Okay.
There it
Do
is.
you have some pillows and things as well,
I
or some
do.
books?
I
Okay.
do. Yeah, I
So
do.
let's start off quite conservatively on that. So it's also nice to have something nice to sit on, so in case you lose control, you don't want to come down too quickly. So we'll start off nice and high. Okay. So
Okay.
Jill's got the chair. Her feet are
Yep.
like this. Her feet are going to be somewhere shoulder width apart. And what she's going to do, she's going to come down until her bum touches the chair. Good. And you can see right here, just pause there for a second. Because she has these pillows in the chair, you can see that her hips are quite high over her knees, and that's okay. We can add range of motion over time. We're just trying to find something that's appropriate for you. So I wonder, Jill, can you do 8 controlled sit to stands? One, two.
Andrew, we can't see Jill. We can only see you because you're speaking.
Oh, very
Oh,
good.
thank you. Thanks for
Thank
jumping
you.
in, Fiona.
Oh, I should be on pin. Maybe I need to be speaking. Here we go. I'm pinned. Can everyone see me? Could you give me a thumbs up if you can see me?
You need to get onto the main screen. You're just a little tiny window at the
I'm,
moment.
I'm a little tiny window. Okay, somebody's giving me thumbs up. Oh, there we go.
And how's that?
Slides off. How's that? Okay, I've got some thumbs up.
Okay.
Take my
All
back
right.
camera up.
Where are we at? Let's see, we're at 4. Ready? Four,
Okay, four, fine.
5, 6, 7, 8. Could you keep on going?
I probably could.
9. Can you do 12?
I can.
10. Okay. 11 and 12. Okay, so she's gone way past what we need. So I can tell that this difficulty for her is probably not going to be an appropriate challenge. So the ways that we can make the challenge, more noticeable is we can go ahead and change the range of motion. So actually, because Jill looks so strong, you can get rid of both, Jill. Why not? Get rid of both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I
Here we
was
go.
going to say get rid of both pillows.
Oh, you want both pillows? Okay, right. Chair's coming back.
Oh,
Okay.
still see
You got my chair? Okay.
still some people problems with people seeing you.
Oh no. What is happening? Can you see me if I'm talking?
We can
Yeah.
see you.
Yeah, okay. I'll just
Okay.
keep talking, Andrew.
Okay. I think enough people can see you. So I think there's different view controls, but
Okay,
I
fine.
think out of 100 people, I think a lot can see you. So let's see.
Okay,
All right.
fine.
So Joel, try this again. Let's see if she can do 8. 1, 2, 3,
Here we go.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, thank you, Tanya. She's giving us some good advice. Okay. So, um, I can tell that probably Jill could do more than that. So then what we'd want to think, well, how can we continue to add this challenge? We can add more range of motion. We can have her squat lower, but maybe she's at the point where that's as low as she wants to based on her current goals. So we can think about, well, how can we add a little bit of weight? All right. So maybe we could have Jill hold a soup can, maybe a backpack, maybe a bucket filled with rocks. And then over time, we can progress on top of that. So the main thing is just ensuring that you find a movement that works for you, that helps you build your confidence, that doesn't cause you pain, that you have a clear way of progressing over time. And there's lots and lots of ways to do that. There's lots of different kinds of equipment. It's sort of outside the scope of this one call to talk about that. But that would be our first place, is just make sure you start and find something that's a good match for you and then build it up over time with the various movements. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing. Okay. Um, Same thing with upper body strength. So we could do a horizontal press like a push-up option, but I'll just go ahead and continue here um, because I think people get the idea. So what this means for you, gradually make sure you add weight or complexity. We've done that already. All right. So finally, then you want to think about what a session looks like. So there's lots of different ways to plan sessions, and there's loads of programs in the world, and they all work for different reasons. They're all designed for certain ways. The way that we designed our sessions is we wanted to make them as quick as possible and as simple as possible, but no simpler. Really, what we wanted to do is we wanted to think about, can we get people to the point where they are confidently working in the level of intensity and challenge that's going to give them the most benefits? Can we find something where even within that 2 to 3 minute rest period that we can still get something that's done and can be done in about 30 minutes or so? Because I think that's really important. And then making sure that we also incorporate not just resistance training, but appropriate impact training, and then some other movements that could be really beneficial. So again, I talked about this idea of weighted carries. So generally, in the Strong for Life program, I'll show you exactly what it is right here. Is one session might look like this: 3 supersets of squats and impacts. So that means that you do 6 squats and then you do 10 impact things. So maybe something like a heel drop where you stand up on your toes and come down. Obviously, you can progress that over time as well. You want to do 3 of those. So squats, impact, rest, squats, impact, rest, squats, impact, rest. And then you set up for your next bit. Then we would incorporate some kind of pushes and pulls. Some days would be vertical, some days would be horizontal. So let's just say something like press ups, and I'm going to say what's called a dumbbell row or a bent over row where you pick up something heavy with one arm. So you do your press ups, you do your pulls, you do your press ups, you do your pulls. Um, you get your impact there, your upper body impact, or you continue with the impact there. You rest 3 times, and then some kind of loaded carries and upper body impact at the end. And this is kind of the point where if you did want something that was a little bit huffy puffy or something that felt like a bit more like a circuit, you can cut out the rest here, get that in. And it sounds like a lot. And the first few times you do it, it might even feel quite overwhelming. But once you get into the swing of it, I find that most people, after they've done every session 1 or 2 times, they really get into the swing of it. And then all of a sudden, all these things that felt so complicated, like tracking and progress and movements and all these things, once you do it, it really does become easy. The hardest part is just taking that step from seeing something on a piece of paper or seeing something on a computer screen to figuring out exactly how you're going to take that and actually do it in a way that works for you. Jill, do you want to jump in?
No, I think that's good. I think it's just worth thinking about this beginning bit of anything is like learning a new language. Like this, it takes a while to get your head around it. And we talk about this a lot in our programming, is that the first few weeks can feel the mental load is quite high because you're learning all of these different movement options and the language that comes with that. And it's a whole new skill. Um, and then once you've kind of got your head around it, the mental load goes down and it just becomes much, much easier and it's suddenly much less baffling.
Yeah. Um, so what else? Well, just remember we are talking about the movement pie. As much as possible, continue to go outside, participate in physical and social opportunities around you. So don't give up gardening or dancing or hiking with your friends. Real life activities have all sorts of benefits that are difficult to quantify. So if you do have opportunities to do social things, by all means go out and do them. If you like your yoga and your Pilates, keep on doing it because there's a whole host of benefits there. It's really just about finding a way to incorporate some strength training into your life that doesn't feel overwhelming. In terms of next steps, feel free to rewatch this webinar. We're going to share it as soon as we finish. Download the slides so you have guidelines if you want. All the guidelines are built in there. I do recommend watching the impact webinar because we go into a bit more about bone quality and bone mineral density and different things there. It's also just some fun ideas. Find a program that will let you start simply and build over time. Try to do about 2 to 3 sessions a week, but don't panic if you don't always manage it. That's one of the big things too. You don't have to catastrophize. Just do what works for you. And over time, everything will move in the right direction. So if you miss a workout, that's fine. If you need to take a few extra days rest, that's fine. If you're traveling and you don't have your normal setup and you have to you have to improvise a little bit, that's fine. All this stuff is okay. Like I said, there's not a line in the sand on this where something is ineffective or ineffective, just as long as you kind of have the basic principles and you incorporate some form of progress, you will gain the benefits of this over time. All right, last bit here. Jill, why don't I pass over to you?
Yeah, sorry, we will stop talking. So just to remember that your journey looks really different from everyone else, depending on your injury history or your limitations, but there will be a way that you can find to start. And it might mean that, say, if your knees are out of the picture at the moment, that you don't have squats in that program, but you start over time doing a little bit of mobility and just seeing a little bit of how much range of motion you might have in your knees. And then over time, you might be able to build that movement in. There's not a kind of one size fits all. And I think it's really important to start, particularly if you're finding it daunting and the idea of lifting is really daunting, is really just to find the movement options that work for you and spend time there. And then you can start on all of the, on how to load it and how to really start building bone density. If you go on to the next slide. Obviously, has got a bunch of steps, but we have got our Strong for Life cohort that starts at the end of February. If you want to join us, it's just a very nice group of people also finding their feet with this. And then if you go on to the next one, Andrew, we kind of use the guidelines from the Royal Osteoporosis Society, Osteoporosis Canada, and from the Lift More study in Australia, and then looked at a lot of the movements that we like to program as well in Wild Strong, just to really produce something that was really, really simple and that we could kind of help you find your way, and then you'd be off and you can kind of find your way after that. But it's a nice group to be part of. If you go on to the next one, Andrew. So yeah, this is just a quick, I guess at the end, I just thought it'd be important. So a strength program looks at all the major muscle groups, focusing on these compound movements that will carry over into real life activity. A program that includes both progressive resistance training and impact training at a level that works for you. A bit of grip training and carrying, particularly for wrist strength and core stability. A program that improves mobility and stability and confidence over time, and a program that will continue to benefit you throughout your life. So really, it's like building up this kind of bank of skills so that you can keep doing it. And you also see very quickly the crossover into everyday life. And then this going back to this not getting distracted by the shiny apples, just something that keeps it as simple as possible, but not too simple. Okay, on to the next one, Andrew. And we talk about this a lot, sort of progressive strength training for bone density does mean you do need to do some workouts and you got to write some stuff down. But it will help you build confidence, and then you can do all of the fun stuff that you want to do. So if you want to get into, natural movement, or you want to learn how to vault, all of this stuff, this is your sort of bread and butter. So while you might think, God, I don't want to do any workouts, it's a nice foundation to build. If you go on to the next one. So that's your strength and impact over there. That's your veggies. And then you can do all of the other fun stuff, and it will layer in quite quickly. Okay, last one. I'll just sit. So here's you'll get these slides anyway. This is the QR code to the impact webinar, which is really good. And there's also a QR code to the mobility playlist for Strong for Life, which is just quite a nice way to kind of see how we coach if you want to join us. And I think that's it. If you go in, there we go. Any questions? Thanks, guys. We'll be working through, I'll just look through the questions that we've got in here.
All right,
And if you need to leave, you can leave a question and jump off and we'll answer it.
Nice comment from Karen Kendall. Yeah, the shiny apple thing is really important. It is really hard to stay focused, and sometimes that's the biggest challenge nowadays. Is not finding information, but deciding what to chase. Any program similar to ours in Cape Town? I don't know if there's any locally, but there's some good online options, Brenda. Um, Kara was saying it can feel overwhelming to construct a program, how to choose what to do and manage effective progression. Yeah, that it can feel like a lot of variables. So going with the shiny apples is just deciding, well, what's sort of like the bare minimum or the minimal effective dose, and that's really what we tried to do with ours. And then one of the nice things about once you've done a strength program for a few months, it makes it easier to evaluate certain other ones and to decide what's a good match for you. When I'm taking a rest from one exercise, is it okay to do another exercise during the rest? Um, it depends on the exercise. You could do something called a superset, which we do a lot, which you can have non-competing movements. So, for example, you could do, say, like a squat, a lower body and upper body, and we do that sometimes. But you don't want to fall into the trap of moving continuously because you'll get tired out, and you just won't be able to maintain that level of intensity. It's also going to affect your strength progress. But there's nothing wrong with working in a little bit of mobility. But just make sure that you really respect the rest because it's very easy to take it out and you won't even realize that that might be one of the factors that's affecting your progress. Um, if we're working out on our own or with a friend, how do we make sure we have good form so you don't get injured, get the intended benefits? Yeah, it is nice to have some reference points. So we really try to incorporate a lot of videos and a lot of points of performance and a lot of cues and things like that. Because eventually you will sort of find a feel. You'll get a familiarity for the movements. Um, Generally with injury is not really going to be a huge issue as long as you listen to your body and don't go too hard, too fast. Um, a lot of times when I see injuries, when people ignore their body and they just do too much and they don't give themselves enough time to recover and they have their reps too high and their weights too high and they do movements that are too complicated. But if you start off really simple and layer it in, it's going to be okay. Now there's some movements that might be a bad match for you. Let's say you do squats and then you know your knees feel painful the next day. It just means that we need to find a variation of that movement that works for you, but your body is pretty good on it. The issue is when people try to be too tough or too stoic, that I see issues show up there.
And
Uh,
if you're working out with a friend and they've also got the same reference points, you can use them and they're much more effective than a mirror. When you think you're doing something and you realize that you're doing something else, it's really nice to have a friend there. So actually get your chest up a little bit or whatever that
um,
might be.
a few messages from Jenny. Doesn't make a difference if we do the exercise fast or slow. There are sometimes people look at tempo training and things like that. I find that it's best not to complicate these things too much. As you get more familiar with it, it's great, but in terms of like the pyramid of things I would worry about, speed isn't too bad. Generally, what I would say is you want to lower, you want to do the eccentric portion with control. So let's say I'm pressing something overhead. If I start here, I want to think about moving the weight quite quickly overhead and then coming back down with control. If you move too slowly, it will reduce the actual weight that you can move, which could reduce some of the benefits from using heavier weights. So I would just say think about moving it confidently when you're overcoming gravity. And then as you're going back down, I would just do it with control. And then another question, Jenny Kane, are rebounders effective for building bone density? Unfortunately, not really. Rebounders have lots of benefits in terms of balance and conditioning. And I think there's probably some good research that says that jumping is just good in general, getting your calf muscles and ankles and everything working. But because they absorb so much of that energy, the ground reaction forces, it means that they're generally not good for building bone density. Like if you were an astronaut in space, they'd be better than nothing. But we have much better options. But if you enjoy them, continue to do them. But that isn't going to be enough for bone density, probably. I also like rebounders. They're fun. Let's see. What would be your view? Oh, thanks, Jenny. On mixing a workout you described with light cardio, jogging. Could it be in the same day or a different day? There's different theories on this. Ultimately, whatever works for you based on your schedule is fine. I would do the strength first and then do a little bit of a jog afterwards. Um, it, I wouldn't lose sleep over the order or how you do it. There are more complex ideas like this concept of consolidation of stressors and things. But if it's something that you're just starting, listen to your body. As long as you're not trying to train for like a marathon and train for a weightlifting competition at the same time, it'll be fine. If you do find that your body's starting to get worn out or you're just feeling achy, then I would back off on them a little bit. But over time, your body will adapt. The biggest thing I'll say is if you feel like you're not recovering enough, if you feel like you're starting to accumulate aches and pains, listen to your body. Um, Liz asked about modifications for hypermobility. With hypermobility, the big thing that you really want to consider is we were talking about moving quickly. I would slow down a little bit with hypermobility because you don't want to go into full extension on movements. You also want to be mindful about creating a sort of a braking mechanism with your muscles. So, like for example, if I'm doing a press up, instead of thinking about extending all the way, I want to maintain a little bit of tension in my antagonistic muscle. So if I'm doing pushing, I still want to think a little bit about pulling. And then the other thing is finding little setups to kind of control your range of motion. So for example, if you were hypermobile and worried about going too low in a squat, then what you can do is you can set up little tips. Like you could squat down to a stack of pillows or a low chair and just maintain that range of motion. Really, the big thing is with time, sort of working with your body and gaining familiarity with the movements. And then you can sort of develop more what's called proprioception, which is just where your body is in space. Um, and those are the big ones. And with hypermobility, it's not always universal. Everyone is not always hypermobile in all their joints, so it's possibly hypermobile in your hips, but still be quite tight in your shoulders. So you really want to do it on a case by case basis. Um, let's see. Okay. So I have a question about osteoporotic spinal fractures. If you've already had spinal fractures through osteoporosis, then you definitely do want to you do want to talk to a GP or a medical professional just to see. Generally, if we're talking about spinal fractures in the past, what we really want to do is we want to limit lower back flexion. So I think the most important thing to do is to pull back on range of motion and start with a very, very conservative range of motion and a very, very conservative weight, and then add in over time. But if you are someone who has osteoporosis, and we talk about this in the program, you want to think about there are certain movement patterns that you want to limit. It doesn't mean you can't do them all the time, but you just want to make sure you don't overwhelm your body. Um, let's see.
Anything on
We-
impact? I'm just going to say, just have a look at the impact webinar because there's quite a lot in there that will help. One from Gwen, what happens if you're inconsistent, so it wouldn't necessarily be the same sequence every week? I mean, for me, I just have to find a group of friends to do it with because otherwise I won't do it at all. So for me, it's all about seeing people that I want to see and going to knowing that I'm going to go and see them, and that will keep me doing the thing. But different people work differently. So if you've got an option of doing something in person or there's something online where you can go and like it's meaningful to you and you can have a chat, I'd recommend that if you're not the type of person that finds programming these things into your week easy, like me, like Andrew, for example.
Do you want me to do a few more questions?
Yeah. Where have we got to? I've lost my place. Sorry.
That's fine. I know where. There was a question
Yeah.
about swinging your arms when you're doing squats. Generally, people only swing their arms in their squats when you're doing more conditioning style squats. Eventually, you'll get to the point where you're probably holding something in your hand. So that issue will take care of itself. It's also probably nice just to take out the extra momentum for this style of training. So there are times, like if I were doing lots and lots of air squats, say in a CrossFit competition, then I would swing my arms. But if I were doing strength training, I probably wouldn't. Um, if you have a plantar plate rupture in your right foot, you should definitely speak with a physio or any kind of practitioner first, just to see, because yeah, you really want to take that into account with the impact training. We can do light upper body impact training and avoid some of the lower body stuff. We can also do unilateral, which means that on your better foot, you can focus on one kind of impact training, and then you can find light ways to do it. But without knowing your specific situation, I couldn't give any recommendations. So I would definitely work with a physio or someone you trust to find a variation that works for you. Um, okay. Just scrolling down for any more. Is progressive resistance the same as progressive strength training? Yes, Kara. So sometimes strength training, resistance training is used interchangeably. Also, sometimes people say weightlifting, even though that's kind of could be a different category. The important thing is just finding some progressive way to add challenge over time, usually through resistance. Okay.
From Helen, we'll be doing another course that's not on Tuesdays. The calls in our course they're kind of more workshops on Tuesdays. So generally, if people can't make the Tuesday call, they submit the question during the week. We'll respond in writing, but then we make sure that we bring it up on the call and we talk it through. So it quite slightly depends how you're wired. I like to go for the in-person workshops. Some people are very good at being really diligent about watching the replay. That's up to you.
Michelle has a question. Where can I find a suggested starter program in detail so I know where to start? Well, I'm going to be biased on this one. I would
Oh,
look into
Michelle.
ours. I would look into ours, but then one, it's not quite a program, I would say, but I think that the Royal Osteoporosis Society in the UK has some very good recommendations. So I think that's a good place to start for general ideas. But in terms of a progressive program, um, it might not have all the details that you want, but that's not a bad place to start.
Okay.
And then Kathy, oh, thanks, Michelle. Yep, there's a recording. Tavi says they'd like to share this with their 88-year-old dad. Please do. Okay. Some people saying goodbye. How's the course member provider? Are there video examples? Yes. So Sarah, we actually have a really good video. We did a webinar, the discovery call recently, and we talk about in depth the different materials, but we have a mix of videos, live sessions if you want to partake in them, written description. We really try to take into account that people have different ways of learning, but we have lots of videos, and sort of our goal here is to give you the confidence so you feel like you could coach yourself and coach a friend, but then also have the support. The other big thing is that because you're doing the program over time with the same people, even if you're not working out with them, it's a really nice support group. And a lot of times we find that people can help answer each other's questions in the message boards and things like that.
And we
Um,
also have feedback, so you can send us videos and we'll let you know how you're getting on.
we have a question about examples of upper body impact.
Yeah, I would have a look at the impact webinar because it goes into a lot more detail on that.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, we were talking about the vertebral fractures up above. So again, make sure you speak with the GP or a physio that you have a relationship with, that sort of understands your background.
A
And then
comment after that is I've spoken to every medical team and no one will advise.
oh, okay, where's that?
It's from Elizabeth.
Okay. Oh yeah, I see that. Yeah. Um, okay. So what you want, if you can find a progressive private physio group, then a lot of times they'll have knowledge there. But then if I were just going to say, start off conservatively, you want to minimize unnecessary rotation and flexion. Now, rotation and flexion are going to be good for most people. So for most people I work with, I say you do want to incorporate some flexion and rotation in your work. But if we want to start off really conservatively here, so we want to make sure that any of our movements are quite controlled in that way. So for example, with squats, I'm going to reduce range of motion so that we can really just sort of focus on the knees and the hips and take the lower back out of it. And we want to be very conservative with the weights that we have at first. Um, and that's going to be the biggest thing. And there are lots of other ways that we can load up your body without overstressing your lumbar spine. But that's kind of something you really need to have a one-on-one relationship with someone on that. Even if it's just talking to a physio so that they can give you a little bit of a feedback, because also confidence is so important. But I would say that reduce the range of motion and be mindful of not doing excess flexion is a good place to start. But even if you have had fractures in the past, you can still build up your bone density in your lower back. It's just a matter of taking it a little bit easier and being really mindful of really moderate progression.
For anyone with osteopenia or osteoporosis, I'm just going to share a link to one of our podcasts with Alison Crouch, which I think it's really thoughtful and it's really inspiring because she has osteoporosis and has done a lot of research into bone mineral density and quality. And I think it's a really nice conversation to start with if you're thinking about going into strength training and you find it a bit worrying. It's a lovely chat with Alison for an hour in your ears.
Um, some good questions from Kara. Yeah, with the spinal flexion, if you have lumbar osteoporosis, speaking of Alison Crouch, I think she sort of talks about this bucket metaphor, where a little bit of stimulus can be good, but you don't want to overfill your bucket. So if you are someone who has been diagnosed with osteoporosis in the lumbar spine, then it just means that we want to find the right amount of stimulus that is going to, provide adaptation, but not so much that causes injury. And that just means that you sort of, if somebody has osteoporosis, they just have a thinner window, a more narrow window of what's going to be beneficial for them. So a little bit of flexion is fine. You don't want to spend the rest of your life avoiding flexion because it's a natural part of being a human being, but you don't want to overly stress it. So you don't want to jump into the deep end and do lots of deadlifts and weighted flexion and stuff like that. You want to start in gradually and make sure you get that level of stimulus. It's very rare that the answer is to avoid something altogether. Um, but you don't want to go to either extreme. You don't want to avoid everything, but then you don't want to just ignore it and overstress your body. So what you want to do is you want to find movements that provide a little bit of stimulus, but not too much. But if we were working with anyone who does have osteoporosis, we have specific movement variations and stretching variations that will say this might be a better match for you, this might be a worse match for you. That kind of depends on the movements that we're talking about. Um,
Good one for you, Andrew. How accurate do you think the Fair Body Scale is in measuring bone mass?
um, I actually don't have the information where I can answer that confidently. But I'll tell you what, I will look it up and I'll give you my take on that. So if we have your email address, I'll go ahead and send it to you because I wouldn't want to say anything that I don't feel confident about answering.
Okay. Um, there was a question about food and different kinds of foods and things. I've said it's out of our lane and remit, but Alison Crouch has some very good resources on that.
Yes. Yeah, generally, sort of the same answer. I've got my own opinions on nutrition, but I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to give nutritional feedback. I'll also say that probably most people on the internet probably should not be giving out nutritional advice either. Um, but I see Alana's question, after a workout session, help strength bone density. I mean, just sort of what you expect. I mean, generally the answer is always going to be having a nice variety of foods and whole foods, making sure that you're getting sufficient amounts of protein. I don't know what your dietary restrictions are. Um, so within that, I wouldn't want to step anyone's toes, but really try to eat some fresh fish about once a week because there'll be lots of benefits there. You really want to make sure you're getting enough vitamin D, so either sunlight or supplements. But then we start getting into magnesium levels and things like that. And yeah, that's outside the
It's
it's
outside our remit.
complicated. It's outside the remit, but eat plenty of good food, eat protein, and if your dietary restrictions allow you to, I would recommend eating fresh fish and things like that. Um,
I think that's it. Um, Last one from Tavi Marie. Do you suggest a starting point for my dad, who's 88, or a seminar that might be good to help him get started? I think for with it depends how your dad is. If there's a local program that he can go, the benefits of him going to do something locally where he can meet other people and move a bit, I think will be is it just probably. I mean, if that's how he's wired, if he likes to be social, that's what I would recommend. What would you say, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because, like as always, the answer, you want to identify your why first. So, you mentioned he's beginning to struggle a little bit with movement. Just that might be a good match with him to start getting fitter. And fitter can sometimes be a tricky question. Um, at 88, you really just want to provide opportunities for movement, like Jill said. So if there's anything that your father enjoys doing, make sure he still has the opportunities to engage with those. In terms of small movements, in terms of good return on investment, having him do, maybe some squat variation, like a sit to stand, like we started with, maybe doing, 3 sets of 8 of those every few days could be a good place to start. But I think it has to be something that he wants to do, seeing a need for it, because as someone who also has, parents, I talked about exercise, badgering your parents into doing exercise because they're supposed to do it isn't always the most effective way. So we need to find ways that are meaningful for them, and that's gonna be unique to everybody. Um,
Okay. And for anyone that's just joined, I will send the recording, and I'm so sorry because we had a capacity of 300 in this webinar, which means that I've now got a lot of emails saying people couldn't get in. It did not even occur to me that we would have more than 300 people coming to this webinar. So if you've just joined, you will get access to the recording and the slides, and I'm really sorry that you couldn't be part of it from the beginning because we are Wallies.
all right.
Sky.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your time. Thanks for all your questions. And thanks for sitting in quite a long webinar. We appreciate it. So thanks for
Yeah.
making the time. And feel free to send follow-up questions and we'll try to incorporate them into future videos or
Oh,
webinars.
we've got a podcast episode coming out tomorrow. So if you we'll take some of the questions that came up today because that's going to be specifically answering questions on sort of barriers to getting started.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Have a good
All right.
afternoon.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
everybody. Thank you.